Cheers.
Cheers.
What's a special occasion?
Yes, it is. And on that note, welcome to the first ever episode of the Arrivals podcast. I'm your host, Merelise Wilson. And I thought, what better way to kick off the podcast, the very first episode, than by telling my birth story. That said, I didn't want to just talk to myself the whole time. So my first guest is none other than my wonderful husband, the father of our boys, Chris Wilson. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Happy to be here.
Was that weird that I called you the father of our boys?
No.
Okay, good.
Felt oddly natural.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because it's kind of a title you're stuck with. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this with me. You know, it's something I'm so passionate about, and I really appreciate you supporting it. I thought we'd kind of just start today by maybe starting at, I was thinking kind of the 40-week mark when I was about 40 weeks pregnant with our first son. So this is back in 2021. So it was still kind of COVID times. It was June or end of May. Let's see, I was due May 25th. So it was very hot here in Atlanta. People were still kind of a little anxious and stuff about going out. So I remember there were still a lot of people were still giving birth wearing masks. That was something I was like worried about. And people were still getting COVID tests. Like when you went into labor, you had to get your nose swabbed, which I was dreading because I'm a huge baby about that. But also, I think the biggest thing to note about the year that I gave birth as it relates to COVID and my birth story is that you were only allowed to have one support person in the room in 2021. And so Chris, for all practical purposes, was my doula. And that plays a big part in the story.
Yeah, I didn't think that I would find that so odd or off-putting, the not having anybody else in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But, all I hadn't had a baby before. And, all I knew were movies, stories, and then, Matt, my brother, having his two and us being at the hospital.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You have, I guess, a certain picture or story or image of how it's supposed to go. And for some reason, I assumed that meant you'd have the baby and there'd be 30 family members.
Right. Both our moms.
Right outside the door.
You, maybe my best friend, maybe our sister-in-law, at least a couple extra people.
Yeah. Nope.
Nope, not at all. And I'm so glad you said that. I think my goal is to break down those perceptions and show that birth can be so unique and different for every single person. And whether you've given birth before or haven't given birth yet, it might be completely different than what you expect or what you see in your mind's eye.
It's your own story.
Yes, exactly.
And we have a doozy.
We do. It was quite a doozy. All right. So that kind of sets the scene. So I was 40 weeks pregnant and I was very committed to not being induced. It was really important to me. And I don't know if we have time to get into all of this today. Maybe this will be a different episode, but the background there is that I was really committed to and really wanted to have a natural birth. And by natural birth, I mean a birth without an epidural. And so based on everything I kind of had read and researched while I was pregnant, I knew that being induced kind of upped my odds of having an epidural for a various number of reasons. And so kind of first thing on my list of ways that my birth can go right is not be induced. And so, as many people know who have been pregnant or given birth, doctors start to get antsy even as early as 39 weeks in today's modern world. And so when I was 40 weeks pregnant, I was not showing any signs of going into labor anytime soon. I wasn't really dilated at all. I think maybe my cervix was a little ripe, according to them, whatever that means. But I really was not showing signs of going into labor anytime soon. And so they were starting to talk about induction. You do reach a point where the risks outweigh the pros of staying pregnant. But my goal was not to be induced before 42 weeks. That was kind of what I had decided for myself, and everyone feels differently about that, but that was kind of what I had decided was 42 weeks was really like my cutoff zone. So I'm 40 weeks pregnant, and go ahead.
And speak really quickly, because I know a lot of things of being 4 years ago. I feel like I don't always remember correctly. But when people ask, when I tell them that you did it naturally both times, no epidural, which, side note, I thought was insane, because again, movies,
we
stories.
should definitely touch on that.
Was it a certain book? Was it a lot of books? Was it, what was it? What people had told you? I feel like you came into it, well, the moment you got pregnant. You were so learned on this particular situation where, I was just like, yeah, I mean, you get an epidural, you don't feel anything, you push it out. If not, it's a C-section. It's not a big deal, right?
You go home with a baby.
Yeah, either way, So how did you just jumped really quickly, I feel like, into 42 weeks, no induction before that. How did you figure all that stuff out and come to that decision?
It's a really good question. I never really had pictured how I wanted my birth to go before I was pregnant. I, like you, had seen, and like most people had seen, how birth was portrayed in movies. My mom had a C-section, and so that was probably the birth story I was most familiar with. And I just always assumed I would have an epidural. I would push sitting up, and that would be it. But as I got older and more of my friends started having babies and sharing their birth stories with me, I started to see, I don't know if it was necessarily a pattern, but I did start to notice that a lot of my friends who had this same plan or lack of plan or whatever it is you want to call it, they planned to get an epidural, and that was kind of it. They were going in and they were getting an epidural, but it wasn't taking, and so they were having an unexpected natural birth, quote unquote, or it was only taking on one side of their body, or they were getting to the hospital too late and they didn't have time to get an epidural. And for some of them, it was really traumatizing. And that just kind of got me thinking, well, what if I prepared for both? Like, what if I plan to have an epidural, but in case something goes wrong, I at least know what I'm up against, like what to expect. Or, I mean, you can't know what to expect, you can try. And so that kind of got my wheels turning of like, what would it look like to explore both options or be prepared for both at least? And then as I started reading about it, I just really got fascinated with the benefits of not having an epidural and just this kind of whole shift in mentality, I think, and about birth and how to approach it and how to view it. And you asked me what book really like impacted me, and I read a ton of books.
I know.
So, I mean, I've got a long list, but the number one book I recommend for anyone, whether you're planning to have a birth with an epidural, a natural birth, a home birth, a scheduled C-section, whatever it is called The Positive Birth Book. And it's by Millie Hill. And that just really transformed my whole perception of birth into this opportunity to view it as like a positive thing and a beautiful thing and something that could be really special no matter which way you decide to approach it. But ultimately, I think that the shift for me was just thinking about it in a really positive light and being excited for it rather than it being something that I feared. Of course, there's a healthy dose of fear when giving birth and doing anything you've never done before. But I wanted to bring a lot more positivity into my birth than I think modern culture like portrays when it comes to birth. So, yeah. So, I mean, needless to say, you were quite shocked when I told you I didn't want to have an epidural.
Yeah, I just didn't understand why.
Right. Why would you ever want to?
Yeah, if I had the chance or the opportunity, I would have 4 epidurals to make sure that I don't feel anything.
Well, and now we like to joke that you've had way more epidurals than I have because you've had a couple epidurals in your back for back injuries.
Yeah.
So I've given birth twice, but you've had more epidurals.
I'm a big epidural guy.
Yeah. So, and I think also going back to it being 2021 and COVID, I think I unknowingly put a lot of pressure on you by deciding this was my plan because we weren't able to have a doula or a birth support person or professional birth support person, at least, in the room with us. So the plan was for me to give birth for the first time, unmedicated or without an epidural, with just you and the midwife and doctor.
But see, I didn't.
And all the books I'd read.
Yeah. And we watched some videos.
Yes, we did. So yeah, so leading up, we did a training course, and the name is escaping me now.
I can't remember.
Oh,
but we were really judicious about watching it.
Yeah,
and getting it done.
And it was great. It was specifically about giving birth without an epidural in a hospital. So, there are obviously a lot of different levels and variations of a natural birth and, everything from home birth to birth in a hospital, but without an epidural. And so this one specifically was really great because it was geared towards and focused on giving birth in a hospital setting, but without an epidural.
I was going to say, when, you were saying you put a lot of pressure on me, I didn't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Until, we got in there and stuff started happening. And
ignorance is bliss.
It was, the bliss was short-lived for sure, for me, at least.
Yeah.
Once we got to the hospital, but I guess we'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm 40 weeks pregnant and they are starting to talk about inducing me. And all of my, best laid plans, all of my gusto and confidence and everything I'd read is starting to go out the window. And I'm starting to get nervous and think, well, doctors know best, right? I should just listen to them. I've been pregnant for 100 years. I'm hot. I'm starting to get a little bit scared. It's the first time I've given birth. Should I just say yes to the induction? And we talked about it a lot. And you were really wonderful and supportive and just so good at reminding me about why I wanted to do what I wanted to do, while also leaving room for me to change my mind, as I think people will see you also did during birth. But so we went back and forth about it a lot. And I talked about it with my midwife and doctor. And ultimately we said, well, let's just get to 41 weeks and then we'll reevaluate at 41 weeks. And so at 41 weeks, I went in and I was 2 centimeters dilated, I think. So we decided they would do a membrane sweep, which is kind of like the most natural, non-invasive, quote unquote, induction. It's not a true induction, but it does tend to get things going. And so they did a membrane sweep and I was really excited and hopeful that that would do the job, because they basically had said to me, we really don't want you to go past 41 weeks. And they were really putting the pressure on me. They had me come in and do a stress test and listen to the baby's heart, and everything was totally fine. But they were still kind of really saying we want you to come into the hospital and be induced at 41 weeks, even though everything seemed fine with my pregnancy. And so I came home from that appointment, and after I'd had the membrane sweep, and I remember we made a steak dinner and had a glass of wine, and I just was so in my head and so anxious and just willing, my body to go into labor, because technically I was supposed to call the next morning and see if they had a spot ready for me at the hospital to come in and be induced. They gave me a number to call.
That was at 7 in the morning. What were we supposed to?
I think it was 7 a.m.
Oh, that's when they opened. Call us if nothing's happened.
Yeah, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Right.
So we went to sleep that night. I think I was pretty anxious. I probably wasn't sleeping well.
I probably was sound asleep.
Absolutely. And I remember I woke up around probably 4 a.m. to a small gush of liquid. But I wasn't confident that it was something important. We'd had some false alarms in the past. And so it was kind of a trickle, not even a gush. I rolled over and kind of felt a trickle. And I mean, pregnant ladies out there, there's a lot of stuff going on at this point in pregnancy. And it really could have been any number of things, which is weird to say. But anyways, I got up and I kind of went to the bathroom to investigate, and nothing seemed serious. So I got back in bed, and did I wake you up? I can't even remember anymore.
I think you woke me up and probably said something, though, to the effect of, I think I might have my water broken, or it was a little wet or something. Mm-hmm. But I was half asleep. I don't think I heard a lot of confidence in your voice, right? Because I feel like at this point you'd have been like, we gotta go.
Right.
But, you seemed, a bit reserved about it. So, I probably just rolled back over to sleep.
I think I didn't want to get my hopes up. And you probably were used to me panicking about every tiny little, like, seemingly potential symptom.
Well, sure. And I think this goes back to the movie thing,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Surely Merelise will know if her water breaks because as it is in the movie, it would be
A gush.
yeah,
It's going to be
something.
obvious.
So yeah, another thing that Hollywood has Hollywooded.
For sure, dramatized.
Maybe not for everybody.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, it was my water breaking.
Whoops.
Yeah. And come to find out, through birth stories, just like this, telling birth stories with friends and, talking to midwives as well and doctors, and nurses, it's so much more common for it to be a trickle than a gush. So just know, anyone out there, if you are pregnant and wondering what it will be like if your water does break, it could be dramatic or it could be really, really subtle. Anyway, so I got back in bed. And I didn't sleep well because I was kind of laying there waiting to see if maybe contractions were going to start, if my water was going to like break more, if it was going to continue kind of like leaking. So my alarm went off around 7 that morning because that was when we were supposed to call the hospital to see if they had a room for me to come in and be induced, which I, as we established earlier, I really didn't want to happen. And oddly enough, something that I didn't know at the time that I know now, if you live in a busy city like Atlanta, where they have pretty huge hospitals where a lot of people give birth every day, there's no guarantee that unless you are being induced for an emergency reason, there's no guarantee that they'll actually be able to bring you in on the day that you are supposed to be induced, quote unquote. So I called and they were like, we're pretty full today. Unless you actually go into labor, I'm not sure we're going to be able to bring you in for an induction.
There's no room at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Which was just funny because I had all this anxiety and fear and anticipation around being induced that day. And then I called and they were like, I don't know, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. So after that call, we kind of looked at each other and we were like, all right, well, I guess we'll just wait and see if that thing that happened a couple hours ago was actually something. And so we kind of just went about our morning, and you were working from home at that point. Like, you decided not to go into the office, I think, for the past few days, just in case something happened. So you could be close by.
Yep.
And it was around 11 a.m. I was sitting on the sofa, I remember, and I started to have some back pain. And I wasn't sure if it was just back pain from being 41 weeks pregnant or if it potentially could be back labor. I knew that the baby was head down, but I think in my last scan or at my last midwife appointment, they had maybe thought he was potentially sunny side up, which can lead to back labor rather than kind of traditional labor in the front of your stomach. So I was sitting there on the sofa, kind of feeling these pains, and without getting my hopes up too much, I did start to really sit there patiently and see if there was any sort of pattern to them. And at some point, maybe 20-ish minutes later or something, I think I called you and I said, I think I might be having contractions. Let's start timing them.
Yep.
And so we started timing those around 11:30 probably.
Yeah, that's right. Because I remember they were still far enough apart where, like, I had my laptop and I was, doing the, on the phone, you can do the timer and you can lap it. So we were doing that, but it was still, not happening frequent enough to where I wasn't also simultaneously trying to answer emails and stuff.
Right.
It didn't seem like, not the panic button, but it didn't seem like we were in like fourth or fifth gear.
No.
We were still in maybe first.
Right. And because I planned on giving birth without an epidural, my plan was to labor at home as long as possible, because in the material I had read, that's the advice they give you if you're trying to give birth as naturally or without an epidural, is to labor in a comfortable environment, an environment where you feel safe. Your body is more likely to progress that way. The cervix actually is like very similar to a sphincter, or it is a sphincter. This is something that Ina May Gaskin, who's kind of the founder of modern midwifery, she talks about a lot in her books, is the cervix is a sphincter. And so if you think about like any sort of sphincter, when it gets nervous, it kind of like retracts upwards. And that's the opposite of what you want to happen when you're laboring. You want to relax. You want it to kind of, decompress and allow the baby to start to move downwards and allow your cervix to expand. So the goal was to labor at home as long as possible. And so I think I thought for a first time baby, that would be a couple hours. I also should say that I was group B strep positive, meaning that I couldn't cut it too close because I had to get to the hospital to get one round of antibiotics in before the baby was born. And so if you don't know what group B strep is, it's a very common bacteria that a large percent of the population has in their body. And it's totally harmless for adults. And the only risk can be to a baby when it's born. If the baby is exposed to bacteria as it's being born, it can cause complications. And so you can be walking around your whole life not knowing you have this bacteria present in your body until you're pregnant, and then they test for it at some point during your pregnancy. And then the recommendation is to get at least one round before you give birth. I can't remember exactly what the protocol is, but I knew I had to get some antibiotics before I gave birth. So I knew I wanted to get to the hospital before it was too late, but I did want to labor at home as long as I could.
Right.
So anyways, I think at this point we're thinking we still have hours ahead of us. The contractions were like 5 or 6 minutes apart. So I was like, I'm going to go take a shower and blow dry my hair and put some makeup on and, just go into labor looking just great and feeling great and, camera ready, all that good stuff. And I got in the shower and the contractions really started progressing all of a sudden when I got in the shower. And so I took a really quick shower. I got out and I was like, babe, I think you need to come in here and time these. And you came in and timed them and they were like 2 or 3 minutes apart.
Yep.
And just getting to the point where I had to pause when I had a contraction to kind of to be able to like breathe through it. And so typical first time parents, we were like, should we call the doctor and see what she thinks? And so we called my practice and gave her a description of everything, including the fact that my water maybe had broken 8-ish hours ago, but we weren't sure. And what was it she said?
I don't know. She seemed mad.
She was like, why are you still at home?
Yeah.
Basically. She was like, why are you talking to me? Get out of there.
She was like, what times? And you're like, oh, 4 a.m. She was, yeah.
Yeah. She was
the tone in her voice got frightening.
Yeah. She was like, get in the car, go to the hospital.
Which, selfishly, I got really excited about because, I had a reason to drive like a bat out of hell.
That's true. All 6 minutes to the hospital.
All 6 minutes to the hospital.
Yeah.
Made it there in 4.
Yeah. So we hop in the car. My hair is sopping wet, best laid plans for makeup and dry hair out the window. And we get in the car, we get to the hospital and Chris drops me off at the front of the labor and delivery unit. Because at that point contractions are close together, but still manageable. And so he drops me off so he can go park the car and like bring our bags in and stuff.
Yep.
I think this is where you should kind of take over.
So dropped you off in that little roundabout, watched you walk in, and then the parking deck was basically right across that just hospital street. And then I grabbed our bags, the birth ball, which
the big purple birth ball.
The big purple birth ball. That's hard to say. And I think that was it. I mean, right? It's just 2 bags. I think it was the ball that made me feel
cumbersome.
The silliest.
Yeah.
And so I think by the time I dropped you off and by the time I was walking through the same doors as you had was maybe 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you had gotten out of the car, you were bright, excited, a little nervous, happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a different situation when I came into the hospital 4 minutes later. You were white, sick looking, scared, and shivering.
Yeah, and covered in blankets.
Yeah, at that point. All within 4 minutes.
Yep.
I'm kind of like, what the hell just happened? Is this, no, I don't understand how did we get here?
Yeah. It was wild. So you dropped me off and I walked in and I had like pre-registered. So I just had to show my ID and I sat down to wait for you. And all of a sudden I just started kind of getting these like chills and then was shaking uncontrollably. And I went back up to the front desk and I was like, do you guys have some blankets? And they took one look at me and like brought a wheelchair out and a ton of blankets. And as soon as you got there, they were like, all right, we're taking you back.
I do remember that. The waiting room, I I was in there for 2 minutes, maybe.
No. Yeah. And at that point, my contractions weren't even really that strong. I wasn't in a lot of pain from the contractions, but I was really uncomfortable because I was just freezing. I was shivering. And so they get us back to a room, and I'm changing like out of my street clothes and into a hospital gown. And I remember when I stood up from the wheelchair, when we got to the hospital room or the delivery room, I did have a big gush of fluid. It was like, maybe, I don't know if it was the contractions that I've been having kind of tore open that little tear I already had that was letting a little bit of fluid out. The contractions, kind of the pressure of that made it bigger. And then when I stood up and gravity did its thing, I did have a big gush of water at that point. And so we are kind of like starting to settle in, and they've put the external monitor on my belly to monitor the baby's heart rate. Oh, we should also say we didn't know we were having. We didn't know if we were having a boy or girl. So that was extra exciting. And so they're monitoring the baby's heart rate, and we're just, starting to settle in. And then the midwife comes in, and I don't think she'll ever hear this, but it's part of the birth story. She was like the one midwife that I was hoping wouldn't deliver me. And of course, she was the one midwife on call that day. And she ended up being wonderful. Yeah. But going into it, she just wasn't the person that I jived with the most. Like, our vibe was not exactly what I was hoping for. And then, of course, she was the one on call. But so she came in, and true to form, she came in with like bad news. And she came in and said, "Your baby's heart rate is really high. I think we're going to have to do a C-section." And we had been there for.
Well, and she had also mentioned that it wasn't just the heart rate. Oh, yeah. It was, I think you're about to spike a fever.
Yeah.
And baby's heart rate is high.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing those same things, and I was like, okay, like, so let's get down to business, right? Let's get started. But then she dropped the bomb of, we're probably going to have to just go ahead and do a C-section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, again, we've been at the hospital now for maybe 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's almost the first thing that we really hear from anybody.
Right. And so we had gone from, planning to labor and give birth with an epidural to now jumping all the way to C-section, which for me was my least desired, or kind of like last on my birth plan options, birth preferences, I should say, because, there's no such thing as a plan, but you can have preferences. And C-section was my least preferred way to give birth. Obviously, the most important thing is always healthy baby, but that was just the last thing that I wanted to end up doing going into it. And so she came in and said, "You're about to spike a fever. I think you have an infection. The baby's heart rate is high. We need to talk about doing a C-section." And I think at that point, I just looked at you and started crying.
Yep. Yeah, that was tough. But one of the things that we had learned mm-hmm. That I think is very important for both the mom to be and the partner or whoever's in the room mm-hmm. helping is that you can always ask,
what happens if we do nothing?
Boom. Where did we hear that?
I think it was in either the Positive Birth book I read or one of the other
6,000 books you read?
Yes, one of the other 6,000 books I read. But I'm probably going to butcher this, but medical professionals who work in hospitals are trained to address problems as efficiently and safely, if you will. That doesn't always necessarily mean they leave room for a lot of options, or they're trained to get the baby from point A to point B as safely and quickly as possible. But that doesn't always necessarily mean that there aren't other options in between. And so she came in and said, like, we're going to have to do a C-section. And I said, what if we wait? What if we do nothing? What if we wait? And that's when lo and behold, there all of a sudden was another option. And so I think that was probably the most valuable thing I remembered out of everything I read. I forgot every single laboring position, pretty much all the other tips and tricks and whatever I had in mind. But I did remember, like, to ask her, what happens if we wait?
And it's tough to really remember anything, but remember something that important, because mm-hmm. it's not like you've built really a rapport with anyone there yet. No. So when they come in, And the first thing is bad news. And it's not just bad news, it's again, in terms of your birth, non-plan, but preferences, it was at the very bottom. You know, it's scary, and then there's that news, and you're in a hospital and there's doctors everywhere, and they tell you that this is how we do it because what's happening now is not safe and this is safe. It's hard to not really not listen, but it's hard to just
stand your ground.
Yeah.
Advocate for yourself.
Sure. Or maybe I just say it's really easy to go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're not doctors. We're not in the healthcare industry. We don't work around hospitals.
The first baby I've given birth to, they've seen a million births.
Yeah, I feel like typically in my visits to doctors and hospitals with any of the stuff that I've had, sports injuries and all that, it's, okay. Yeah. Whatever you say, So I think that's a really important thing to if you're going to remember anything.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And the answer totally could have been, we cannot wait.
Yeah.
And that would have, and if that had been the answer, then we would have said, okay, let's go. But she gave me a different answer when I asked. And her answer was, we can hook you up to internal monitoring, confirm if the baby's heart rate is as high as we think it is, and then we can go from there. And so for those of you who don't know, internal monitoring is where they take these tiny little, or they take these cords and they have tiny little hooks on the end of them. And they insert them through your vagina and they hook the tiny little needle or hook onto your baby's scalp. So they pierce your bag of water. So if it hasn't broken already, it's going to break. They pierce the bag of water and they hook this tiny little needle into your baby's scalp so that they can get an extremely accurate read of the baby's heart rate. And if that sounds really uncomfortable, you're right, it is. And so we did that. And at that point now, I've got these cords coming out of me. And so all of my planned options, namely the birth ball, all my planned options for laboring and coping have gone out the window entirely because I can't sit down. I think I tried once and was like, nope, that's not going to work.
And you trying to do it or planning on doing it naturally.
Right.
The big thing we learned from all the videos that we watched and all the books was learn all these positions, including birth ball, use the whole room if you can and find something that's comfortable or makes you feel like you're getting somewhere. Now you've got the internal monitoring, which is hooked to one of those, what do you call
machines.
it? So you got to roll that around with you. You've got your antibiotics in the IV. So you're walking around with the IV pole on wheels.
Yep.
Not very mobile.
Not very mobile at all. I think I had maybe a 3-foot radius.
It wasn't great.
It was not great. And every time I need to go to the bathroom or anything, we had to unhook the internal monitoring. So that made us nervous every time we did it.
Yeah.
That something was going to happen in the 1 minute I had to go to the bathroom, or we wouldn't be able to remember how to hook it back up. It was a hot mess. We were very quickly going down my list of birth preferences. We were getting lower and lower on the
I think this is a good
list.
time to mention too, I was unprepared for how often the two of us were going to be alone in the room.
Yeah.
The nurse that is in your room has several other rooms. So she's making her rounds. The midwife has other patients as well and is making the rounds. So there were lots of times where it was just us.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready for that.
No.
Especially when, I feel like things keep getting, I don't know if you say complicated or the list of things.
I think complicated is a good
word.
Yeah.
I guess. The list of things that are kind of getting added, just like the internal monitoring and, hey, here's how you unplug it so she can go to the bathroom. Here's how you plug it back in. It's not a big deal. But then when you do it the first time, there's no one in there and you're trying to find the damn place to stick it back in so you can get the baby's heart rate. Yeah. That's just something that I remember. We were alone more. I just thought, I don't know.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to know?
I thought there'd be someone in there.
Somebody.
Yeah. Someone besides just the two of us.
Yeah. And there were times, it's 15 minutes.
Right. Well, and especially because I think at this point they have, flagged my labor as, I don't know, not standard or something. Like, obviously there have been some complications. So I figured that maybe we'd get some extra attention or something, but that didn't seem to be the case.
And you were probably the only one on the floor doing it naturally.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what they said.
I think they did say that. We're kind of skipping ahead, but
yeah.
People knew there was someone on the floor when you were going through the big contractions.
That's for sure.
Someone.
It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But so I've got internal monitoring. I'm hooked up to the fluids, and they've got the antibiotics going, and the antibiotics all of a sudden make me feel really nauseous.
It was penicillin?
It was penicillin, yep. And they did warn me, and I think I had read it again also, that penicillin can cause nausea. But I'm someone who just does not throw up easily. And so I thought, surely I'll be fine. Even if it does cause nausea, I'll power through. But then all of a sudden I was throwing up in a bag. So that was kind of another, wrench in the plan. I'm just feeling not good at this point.
And in the bathroom.
And in the bathroom.
While your contractions were happening.
Yeah.
And the internal monitoring's been disconnected.
Yes.
And you're having to wheel the penicillin IV thing into the bath. And there's no one in the room.
Yeah.
Except me. And I'm scared.
You did not seem like it. Well, you were a champ.
Well.
Natural born doula right here. If anyone's looking for a male doula, Chris Wilson is your guy.
Natural faker.
And so I think at some point during all of this, the midwife and the OB on call come in. Mm-hmm. And they say, baby's heart rate is still looking kind of high. We now have some more choices for you. C-section, or we can start Pitocin and try to get this baby out faster, because we don't really want the baby to be, we don't want you to go through a long labor with the baby's heart rate the way it is. And so Pitocin was yet again another thing very low on the list of preferences for me. For those of you who don't know, Pitocin is a drug that artificially induces labor. And the reason I didn't want it for me is that it tends to make contractions more painful, because it's creating an artificial contraction and they tend to be stronger than natural contractions. And that's kind of what, how it speeds up labor. And I didn't want to have stronger or more painful contractions than absolutely necessary, because again, I'm trying to do this without an epidural. And so Pitocin, if you're familiar with kind of the waterfall of interventions, that's something that's talked about a lot, is Pitocin often ends up leading to more interventions like epidurals or C-sections. And so, but she gave me the choices. She said, here's your choice. I know you don't want either of these things, but which is the lesser of two evils? And so at that point we said, let's do the Pitocin. And I remember the nurse, or not the nurse, it was the OB. She said to me, which really pissed me off, honestly, at the time. She said to me, now, there's no shame if you need an epidural after we start Pitocin. I tried to labor naturally myself with Pitocin, and I didn't make it. So, no pressure. And I think there's one of the number one things that you don't want to hear when you're trying to give birth without an epidural is someone saying something like that. It was really not encouraging at all.
Yeah. It's some good bedside. It's not even bedside. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was pissed.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but the way she said it was, she just kind of was like, I have no faith in you.
Pretty much.
She was like,
as if I couldn't do it.
Exactly. That was kind of the gist of it, was like, if I couldn't do it, there's no way you. But then for me, that was like, oh, let me show you. That's my personality, is you think I can't do something? Let's go.
Good motivator.
Yeah, it was.
If you needed one.
I mean, I think at that point I needed all the motivation I could get.
We just kept getting bad news.
Yeah, we kept getting bad news, one thing after another. And, I think, again, a lot of times when someone's trying to give birth naturally in a hospital setting or anywhere, you're going to have people in the room who have done this before that can advocate for you, like a doula. And we didn't have any of that. So we're really just going off of what I've read and our gut instincts and It was a lot for a first-time birth to do it alone, just the two of us, essentially.
Right, yeah. The COVID kept everybody, including our family, away from the hospital.
Yeah, which is probably good. I can't imagine my mom having seen me in that state. I don't think she would have been able to stand it. No. So I'm laboring, and they've started the Pitocin. At this point, the contractions are getting really strong, really painful. I'm really not catching a break between contractions. They're just, it feels like they're rolling back to back to back. And I remember, because of the internal monitoring and everything else going on, the only way I could really labor was standing up, slow dancing with Chris. And when a contraction would hit, I basically would just let you hold my weight.
Yep.
I would essentially, my knees would just buckle and you would kind of like hold me up, or I would sometimes, kind of grip around your shoulders. But basically,
you bit me.
I bit you. I did. During one particularly painful contraction, I bit his shoulder. And when the contraction ended, I think I was like, did I just bite you? I'm so sorry. And you were like,
yeah. It was so funny. When the contractions would subside, it was like you were back.
Yeah. For 2
just
seconds.
Tired and just completely exhausted. And then, next would come the next contraction, and then it would just turn it. It's like, you won't like him when he's angry. and you bit me. And I don't remember if I said, I think I was just like, don't let her know you're.
Oh, you were so nice about it.
Don't show her weakness. And then the contraction came down, and you were like, did I bite? Like, you just took back. I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I don't think you broke the skin.
Oh, God, I'm so sorry.
No, I think I saw what you were going through.
Yeah. And because you were watching the monitor.
Yeah, so the monitor
was behind me.
Was behind you, yeah. And so I'd be peering over her shoulder as we were slow dancing for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Especially towards the end. Yeah, I feel like for a while there, the bad contractions would be coming, but there's still a bit of a gap there, which allowed you to kind of catch your breath. And then I'd let you know, I could see it coming. I'd be like, here comes another one. But when we got into the, minute to sometimes almost 2-minute long contractions, and I could watch it come down, and then there was maybe 10 seconds and the next one came, that I'm sort of speaking for you. I'm just saying from my perspective, because it's almost like you're watching a monitor, but it's kind of like you're watching the game happen, right? Because I'm, it's just a big hill, and then it goes away, and then it comes back up, and seeing it just come back to back to back, I was almost like, oh no, how much longer is this?
Another one?
How do we, what?
Yeah. And at one point during all of that, so like we said, we were kind of in a slow dancing position. At one point, a nurse who I'd never seen before came in to check everything. And she said, honey, I'm going to need you to straighten your arm. Because I had my arms hooked around his neck. We're slow dancing. She said, honey, I'm going to need you to straighten your arm. The fluids aren't getting into your vein when you bend your elbow like that. And I think I looked at her and was like, are you serious? Do you see what I'm going through right now? Like, I don't know what my arm is doing. I'm certainly not in the state of mind to intentionally keep it straight at all times.
Didn't it hurt when you straightened it out?
It was uncomfortable just in general because they put it right in the crook of my arm and my elbow. And so that was a learning for me that I actually talked about with my doula when I was pregnant the second time, was something you don't think about going into labor is like, where would you prefer to have your IV? And so the second go around, I asked for it on my forearm.
Yeah, on the outside.
Yeah,
right?
On the outside. Yeah. And it was so much better there. So just little things you don't think about until you've done it, or you have advice from someone who's done it. So yeah.
It also reminds me when you were talking about the nurse coming in, and I was talking earlier about the times where you're alone. One of the times we were slow dancing, which is a really, I think, funny, sweet way to say, like, when all hell was breaking loose. You didn't see it or feel it, I guess, but we were kind of moving this way, and I looked down, and there was what I thought a very sizable puddle of blood, which made me really nervous, right? Because blood,
Yeah.
that much, especially like, you said before, like the hospitals are very bright and white, and it's a very
obvious.
It's a big contrast on that floor, so it's very noticeable. And I had no one to ask or point, or like make big eyes at, be like, help. Eyes. But that being said, when the nurse made her round and came back in, I did that. I made the big eyes thing. She locked eyes. I mean, I like looked down, and she looked at it and gave me the like, it's okay. I don't think it was a thumbs up, but she made me feel like that's that's an acceptable amount of blood on the floor.
You're like, cool.
Oh, totally. Good to know. Yeah. We'll just keep doing what we're doing then.
And I think somewhere around that same time, I started feeling pushy, if you will. And by pushy, I meant I had the urge to push. Like I was starting to feel like I wanted to bear down. And they always say you should absolutely at that point kind of have someone evaluate your progress. If you're giving birth in a traditional setting, some people believe in just like listen to your body. But for me, I was, somewhere in the middle. And the recommendation is if you're comfortable, have someone check your progress at that point of your cervix to see how dilated you are, because you don't want to push too soon. You can damage your cervix. It can swell if you push before you're fully dilated, or the baby could be coming. Either way, you want people in there.
Other than just me.
Yeah, other than just the hubs. And so at that point, you rang the nurse, called her on the call button, and they came in, and the midwife was like, can you lay on the bed? To which I think I was like, do I have to? It was not comfortable to lay down or easy to lay down, but I laid down on the bed, and she at that point was like, you're 7 centimeters, or was it 5?
I still think this was like not the progress we were hoping.
Yeah, for. I think so. It was 5, and I was disappointed because in my head I was like, if I'm in this much pain, surely I'm going through transition, which is around when you go from like 7 to 9 centimeters. So I thought, surely I am in transition if it hurts this badly. And so I think hearing her tell me I was only at 5 was really disheartening.
Sure.
And I started to think at that point, am I going to make it? Like, I was getting really tired. As I said before, the only way I could labor was standing up, dancing. And so I think anyone standing and dancing for 5 or 6 hours is going to be tired. And then you add in contractions to that. And I think, my legs were shaking. I was getting really physically exhausted. And I was starting to wonder, am I going to have energy left to push? If I'm literally not able to catch a break between these contractions, what's this going to look like in a couple hours?
Yeah. And I think what's really tough about that is it's certainly easier to push through something, anything, if someone tells you it's just 3 more minutes,
right.
Or it's just another 100 yards, or we're only going to do this 2 more times. Then you're like, oh, and you can go and give it your all.
Yeah.
When it's just like an open, could be 20 more minutes, could be 3 or 4 more hours,
or could be 10 hours.
Don't know. Yeah, it could be tomorrow. Yeah, hard to say.
With first-time babies, you hear the stories of 24, 36 hours of labor.
So that's easy to get you down too. Yeah. Especially when you're going through the pain and exhaustion you're already in.
Yeah.
There's an end in sight, but it's not like a light at the end of the tunnel. It might just be more tunnel.
Right. And I do remember thinking one of the mantras that really stuck with me that I did plan ahead of time was pain with a purpose. I was like, I know this is painful, and your body, your reaction to pain, I think human nature is to want to do anything to avoid it. But I kept telling myself, like, this is not the same pain as a broken arm or broken leg, or not the same pain as an illness. Like, this is pain with a purpose. It's a natural thing happening. It's not an indicator of something wrong. I think we associate pain with wrong. And so I did just keep reminding myself, like, this is pain with a purpose. Like, this is
creating life.
Yeah. I mean, the most important purpose. Right. And I didn't know when the end would be, but I knew it would end. And I kept reminding myself. And then also I remember at one point, so we had this, so Chris and I are very, I don't know if musical is the right word. We love music. Chris is very musical. I would love to be musical. I'm not really. I can't carry a tune. But we both love music, and music has been a really important part of our relationship, and bands and songs that we love are it's just a really big part of who we are. And so we had this playlist. We had two playlists. We had an upbeat playlist, and then we had a kind of chill playlist that we've been adding to for my entire pregnancy. And we brought a speaker with us to the hospital. And so the plan was to put music on and dance through the contractions and, be really cool and chill about it. And zen, we'd put the chill playlist on if I needed to be zen, and put the upbeat playlist on like when we wanted to have fun and distract.
I think the upbeat playlist was called Baby Lit.
It was.
And
yeah.
Baby Chill.
And Baby Chill, yeah. And so because this all escalated so quickly, we never even put music on.
Right.
But I remember one of the songs on our playlist was a Kings of Leon song. And there's a part in the song where he sings, just ride the wave. And that one tiny bit of the song just like dug itself into my brain, just earworm. And every time I'd have a contraction for a while, I would just hear in my head him singing, ride the wave, ride the wave.
Some big ass waves you were
on. I know. And so that helped me. I did kind of get in the zone for a little while, just thinking that, just like ride the wave, ride the wave. Yeah, I mean, at this point, like we're just continuing to labor.
Back to slow dancing.
Back to slow dancing. And I can't remember what precipitated it, but we did call someone in again, and they checked me, and I was 7 centimeters. And that was discouraging.
It could have been your screaming.
Might have been the screaming.
Well, hold on. I'm not poking fun at it.
No.
It's just
I was loud.
Well, for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And we alluded to it earlier that I think you were the only one on that floor or in that wing that was doing that. So, you were the only one making any kind of racket.
Yeah. That's so true.
But yeah. Came in 7 centimeters.
And it's probably
obviously
like 5 o'clock at that point. We've probably been there for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah. Somewhere between 5 and 6.
There, yeah. She told me I was 7 centimeters. The pain is just back to back. I'm getting no break. Sometimes contractions are literally 2 minutes because Chris is watching them and timing it like 2-minute long contraction, maybe a 30-second break back into a contraction. And
I don't think you were getting 30 seconds.
I didn't feel like
it. I think you were getting 10 seconds.
Did not feel like it. And
some of them rolled into each other too.
Those are like the 2-minute long ones.
Yeah, like it would be coming, you're kind of getting that relief and it's coming down. And
then it just
if no pain or pressure is zero, it would get down to like, 20%. And all of a sudden it would just go 20, 30, 40, 50. They were disappearing off the screen.
Yeah.
That's where, if you could see my face, I was just like, when's it going to peak? Oh, it's off the screen.
Yeah, I can't see it. And that's when I started to just feel really discouraged. And I started to think to myself, is this how I want to do it? Like, I know I can do it. I know I'm strong enough to do it. Do I want to do this way? And we had an agreement that if I wanted to get an epidural, I had to tell Chris 3 times because he knew how important this was for me. And he was so amazing at towing the line between being supportive, but also leaving room for me to change my mind and make a different decision if I wanted to. Truly, you did an amazing job. I don't know. It just came naturally to you because I never felt pressured one way or the other. I just felt 100% supported.
Well, it was so easy to see and so obvious how much it meant to you to try this, right? I mean, you had read so many books. Again, it's COVID. So, our classes were what was it called?
Copa birth. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, Copa birth. Watching that stuff and all the reading and all the prep and all the sort of exercises we did. So it was very apparent how much it meant to you. So it's not me going through it. It's you. And so long as I can give coaching and encouragement where necessary, but obviously leave room for you to be like, no, stop. I'm serious. I'm done. Was kind of what I was shooting for.
So it was 3 times. I had to tell him 3 times that I wanted to get an epidural. And so the last check I'd had, I was 7 centimeters. I'm getting no relief. I'm exhausted. I'm starting to, again, think about, am I going to have any energy left to push when I finally get there? I don't know how much longer I have. a lot can happen between 7 and 10. And so I told you 3 times, I guess.
So I do remember there was nobody in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And you had just had one of those back to back to back ones.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, the one in between the back to back to back might have been 30 seconds. For some reason, we were able to have a somewhat lucid conversation where you weren't like climbing up a contraction. And you said it, I think I want the epidural. I'm like, no, you got this. Like, and then you mentioned something about I'm exhausted. I don't know how much longer this is. I'm only at 7 centimeters. I have to have strength to push. I want an epidural. That was number 2. And I started doing it and I was like, oh, but the plan, like, we've been working so hard. You've been working so hard. And you were like, I want the epidural. Yeah. I was like, oh, got it.
Got it.
And so I pushed the call button. Mm-hmm. And I think, did the midwife and the OB come in at the same time?
At least the midwife, yeah.
Oh, I remember because they were like, I forgot you push the button and they talked to me back and I was like, I think we want an epidural.
That's right, yeah.
So I was talking to them through the... That's
right.
Right?
Yes, yeah. Yes. You said, I think we want an epidural.
So that's why they probably both came in because I'm sure the OB was like, I knew it.
So they came in and I do remember it had been 45 minutes since they checked me and I was 7 centimeters. It had been 45 minutes. And they came in and midwife said, well, let me check you to see how far you are. And I get on the bed, which I wasn't happy about because it wasn't comfortable. And she goes, oh, you're 9.5 centimeters.
Boom, baby.
It's go time. And so I was like, oh, well, that's why it hurts so freaking bad because I just have been going through transition and I've gone from 7 centimeters to basically 10 centimeters in 45 minutes, which is pretty dang quick. Come to find out that's kind of my MO apparently in labor, which we found out with the second birth as well, but I'm skipping way ahead. So she says, you're 9.5 centimeters. You just have a tiny lip of cervix. Let me move it. And then we're good to go. And so I lay down and I remember I was kind of on my back, which I didn't want to be, but I also at that point again was exhausted and I kind of felt like I started blacking out, honestly. It's really hazy.
Which is a bummer because that's when we actually started the playlist.
I know. That is when we started the playlist. I remember snippets of it, but I think I was so relieved to be pushing and overwhelmed and exhausted. I just it's really hazy for me. And so we start pushing and you probably remember this better than I do.
So his heart rates are not, sorry, his, right?
Babies.
The babies. We don't know. Heart rate is still very high. Or is this when it went?
It plummeted. It went the opposite. So it had been high my whole labor, and then all of a sudden it plummeted.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you had been pushing for maybe 20 minutes.
And not making any progress.
And no progress. Was this when they brought the mirror?
Not yet, I don't think.
Okay. So I can't remember what order some of the things came in that we're about to talk about.
I think that it happened pretty quickly, what you're about to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to say it in my words, and then you can say what the actual thing is because I cannot remember what it is called. Yeah. You're pushing, you're not really getting any progress. And Miss OB, who didn't think you were going to be able to do this without an epidural, suggests, in my words, putting a plunger on its head and pulling it out.
A vacuum.
There you go.
Yes.
Well, to me, it looked like a Nerf gun.
Well, again, this is where I blacked out. I don't remember. I don't even remember her suggesting it. It just happened.
Well, I remember when she suggested it, this was on our list of we don't want that. Right. We don't want forceps. We don't want
a vacuum.
The plunger.
The plunger.
So, the heart rate's plummeting. A doctor's telling you that we need to do this. So they put the Nerf gun and she pulls hard. And, there's a noise and everything. So I'm expecting that there's going to be a baby after she pulled. But it came off of the baby's head. And I was terrified because, you know, I was expecting to see a baby with how hard she pulled, and there was no baby. And I'm like,
what just happened?
But luckily, her
she did it again. Remember, she put it
back
on.
Popped off. That's right. Yeah. Then she did it again, did the same thing. And I wanted to be like, lady,
if it didn't work,
leave the baby be right now. Like, let's not, hurt him.
Right.
But on the second attempt, the heart rate went to normal.
Mm-hmm.
Like good, right? Because all day it had been high and then it had plummeted. And so basically it's weird to not say his name.
You can say him.
So on the second pull, she was able to, I guess, pull him into a comfortable position because his heart rate normalized.
Yeah.
Right. So he had been stressed all day with a high heart rate. And then at some point when you laid down and pushed a couple times, he got into a certain this position,
umbilical cord was pinched,
something like that, where then the heart rate plummeted, and 2 pulls with the Nerf gun and
plunger.
Sure,
vacuum,
whatever you say. We were back to a normal, or not even back to. This is the first time that there's a normal heart rate all day. And I think she said something like, that has never happened before. I think she was talking about it just popping off of his head like that.
Yeah.
Or at least twice.
Yeah.
But it happened twice and pulled him into a position where she went, well, let's just go back to pushing.
And I think
which is kind of wild when you think about it.
I think my doula told me the second time around when I was recounting all of this to her that they have to stop at some point after like 2 unsuccessful. There's some kind of protocol where they have to stop.
Well, it was a jolting pull when she did it.
I truly don't remember. I don't remember. I don't think I even realized what she was doing. It happened so fast. I went from pushing to all of a sudden the midwife was kind of in position to all of a sudden the OB was at my feet and something happened. I wasn't fully aware of what it was. And then obviously, I found out very shortly after that she was attempting to pull the baby out with the vacuum, which is something I didn't want. But it happened so fast I didn't even realize what was happening.
Yeah. It worked.
The good news was it worked, I guess. It didn't work how it was intended to, but it worked out for us. And baby's heart rate was normal. And they kind of
how
said,
the whole day was going.
Yeah. And they kind of said, carry on, I guess, keep pushing.
Yeah.
And at that point I was on my back and I remember saying to the midwife, and I had my feet up in the stirrups, which if you've ever read any book about giving birth naturally, these are like all things they tell you not to do, that it like closes your cervix. It's not an optimal position for moving the baby through the cervix, et cetera, et cetera. And I said that to the midwife. Like I said, I don't feel like I'm making progress. Like, can I try a different position? And she basically said no to me. And then that's again where I feel like having an advocate like a doula there who has been present in a lot more births than you have can help advocate for you. At that point, I was just exhausted and scared and tired of arguing. And so I kind of said, okay, and continued on.
And I was no help.
Well, you were doing everything you could. I
was a yes man.
So I kept pushing. We did put music on at that point. That was one thing I do remember that was enjoyable. My contractions actually kind of subsided, which can happen. I remember I wasn't really like feeling the urge to push after all this kind of happened. And they were telling me when to push, which is again, something I hadn't wanted. I wanted to push based on how I felt, patient-led pushing versus like nurse-led pushing or midwife-led pushing, where they're telling you to push because they see that you're having contraction on the monitor. I wasn't feeling that like urge. I wasn't feeling the contraction. Like it wasn't causing me to want to push. Also, there were like 100 people in the room at that point.
Oh, yeah, we hadn't talked about that yet. I don't know how many people there were supposed to be in the room.
Not that many.
I think in the corner, what do they get? The little NICU team, just
the baby
because.
Team.
Yeah, I think there were 4 of them, and then there was, we won't count you, just around the bed. So then there was me, there was an OB, a midwife, the nurse that was currently
on call,
on duty or working, the nurse that had been there previously that we liked a lot, that this was like her last.
It was her last day at Northside. She was a travel nurse.
She was going to Seattle or something.
But she stayed late, stayed past her shift to see our baby born, which was very sweet.
So 4 NICU, 2 nurses, an OB, a midwife, and me. So I think 9 people should have been.
Right, which is a lot.
And that's including the nurse that didn't have to be, but she wanted to see it through, which I thought was cool. I think there were 15 plus people in there.
All these new faces.
Because, as I feel like we're beating a dead horse now, the only one that was doing it natural, and it was pretty easy to find our room.
I remember at one point someone was holding my leg and she was like, "You got this." And I was like, "Who are you? I have never seen you before."
I was like, "Yeah, girl, go."
Yeah. I was like, "Where's my husband?" But you were by my head.
Yeah.
But on the positive part of it was, I remember we were singing and the midwife was like, "This playlist is awesome. Y'all have great taste in music." And a song would come on and we'd be like, "Oh, this is the song the baby's going to be born to." Yeah. I remember That's My Daughter in the Water came on. And I looked at you and I was like, "What if it's a girl and she's born to this song?" And so that was really sweet and fun. And that is a high point in my memory of the whole process. But I was really just not connecting with the pushing. They brought me a mirror, and that was something that I was totally all for because I obviously love this stuff and wanted to see what was happening. But it actually was really discouraging for me because every time I pushed, I wasn't seeing progress being made. I remember literally thinking at one point when I pushed and was looking in the mirror, I was like, "I don't see how this is going to work." Like, this is
physically, how does this
baby is not coming out of that. And so I kind of stopped looking at the mirror at some point.
I think you asked them to roll it away.
I think so. I was just like, "Get this out of here. It's not working for me."
Get that out of here.
And so at this point, I've been pushing for close to an hour and a half. An hour. Okay.
An hour and a half.
Again, just like really not feeling like I'm making a lot of progress. Every time I push, the baby's head would like crown and then it would retract back up and then crown and retract back up. And I remember the midwife kept saying, like, "You're so close. You're so close. I can see his head. I can see his head." And finally, on one big push, she basically pulled him out.
Yeah. So I remember maybe for the last 10 minutes, I was going because I was staying at your head to talk to you so you could hear me. And then I went down south of the border, which I was nervous about, to just get a look too. And it's, there's a lot going on down there, and I didn't want to say something like what I thought I saw or how close and be wrong. Looking back on it, I don't think you can be wrong if you say anything positive. Like, I see you're so close, because even if you're not, it's a good feeling for you and good motivation. Certainly don't want to say something like, "I didn't even see any part of a baby down there." Like, what?
I don't recommend saying that.
Yeah. And so I saw it and I told you, and you looked right at me, like relieved and almost like shocked, like, "Really?"
Yeah.
Like, you saw, like, it's close. And I was like, "Yes." And I felt like that gave you enough renewed energy in those next 3 minutes to give some really good pushes. And then the midwife basically, I saw it in her eyes. You did like a really big push, and I could kind of see her kind of doing these motions with her shoulders and what she was going to do. And then she just reached forward and did this twist thing.
And he came out. It was I didn't even have to push his whole body out.
That. It just
all happened in one.
She did. It was kind of like she was like, "Nah, we're done here."
Yeah. She was like, she needs an assist.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I remember actually the most painful part of pushing was, a lot of people say that like pushing is more as a relief versus contractions and laboring leading up to pushing, which I would 100% agree with that. The most painful part of pushing for me was when she was like trying to like manually stretch, and she actually was amazing. Like, she helped, I think, prevent me from tearing. Like, she was putting warm compresses. Like, she was trying to help, like, use her hands to stretch me out and all of that stuff. But that was the most painful part of it. It wasn't even the pushing.
Is that Ring of
Fire, all that stuff. Yeah. But again, the pain for me personally was much preferable to just labor pain. But I think because we had an end in sight at that point. So after all that, baby's finally here. And it was really surreal. And I think I was honestly like really like shocked.
That it was kind of
over. Yeah.
That part.
Yeah. But there still was one more really big thing. And that was to find out if it was a boy or girl.
Mm-hmm. And so the plan was the baby would come out. They'd put the baby on your chest.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would tell you.
I would try not to look.
Yeah. If it was a boy or a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And we had told that to the midwife, right?
And the nurse who'd been there.
Yeah. So some of the people knew. Mm-hmm. So.
And also I think the plan was you would tell me if it was a boy or a girl, and you would tell me the name.
But we didn't have a girl.
But we didn't really have a girl name, so we should have known.
So
we weren't 100% on a girl name. We were 100% on a boy name.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the baby came out, and they put it on
the alien,
your chest. I was on the right side of
mm-hmm,
you,
mm-hmm.
And they put the baby with its back to me.
And I remember I was just looking at
me. You refused to like look down.
I was holding this little baby.
Yeah, and you didn't understand why I wasn't talking to you. And I'm looking at this baby butt and looking at someone. You know, there's people running around, right? Yeah. It was sort of chaotic. It could be too that like my child was just born too. So like my ears are like ringing or whatever. Yeah. And
you'd been through a lot with me. It wasn't just me.
I don't know who it was that saw me. It might have been the midwife. Mm-hmm. But they were like, the dad is telling the mom the sex.
Because one of the nurses.
Flip it over.
Yeah. Because one of the nurses that I'd never seen before until the.
Oh, yeah.
When we started to say.
Congrats on your.
She started to say it. And I was like, stop it.
And someone was like, oh, and just like took him. I mean, it's funny. Like they put him on you, like not like gently. It was like they flipped him over like a piece of meat. Yeah. What's very interesting for me, I don't know if this is a dad thing. I knew that I needed to look between the legs to find out what it was, to tell you immediately so that you could start to actually, begin your
process.
Mother. Yeah. But I looked right at the face. And I remember being like, oh, that's me in smushy alien form.
I hope it's a boy.
And I got a bit distracted. Aww. And then I looked down and I looked at you and I said, it's Kit.
Which was our boy name.
Yeah. That was fun.
It was.
That was fun, for how long the day was, how much bad news we got along the way, mm-hmm. that we figured our way through, for all the different obstacles, mm-hmm. and detours we kind of took. I know you at least in the back of my mind, there was still one little happy surprise.
Yeah.
That we got a lot of surprises that day. Yeah. But this one was like ours, mm-hmm. our surprise. And that was a fun moment.
I forgot that was something also that kind of got me through during some of the harder moments of labor. Was I kept thinking, at the end of this, I get to find out if I'm having a girl or a boy. And it was like this one last, medal at the finish line sort of thing. And then he was born to Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, which was so special. It was cool because it's like, here comes the sun, mm-hmm. S-U-N or S-O-N, and it was a boy. But also that was my father-daughter dance with my dad at our wedding. He's very special to me. And so it was just perfect.
It was. For how imperfect the day.
Yeah.
went. But it's at the end of it all, it's our day. Mm-hmm. It's our story. And so it is perfect. Mm-hmm. We just, like you said, it's probably not going to go according to plan.
Yeah. But it still wasn't quite over after that.
No, it was not.
No.
We don't want to say it's just getting started, but it was like...
You're still with us.
Yeah, if you want to say that the birth story was truly like a book, mm-hmm. we still had several chapters.
Yeah, we still got an epilogue. So they put him on my chest. Chris told me it was a boy. We had this moment of just pure, effervescent happiness. And all this probably happened in the space of 3 seconds, 5 seconds?
Out, chest, mm-hmm. flip, face, weenie, name, 10 seconds.
At most, because honestly, probably less than that, because then they took him off mm-hmm. of me and they cut his umbilical cord. Again, I didn't even know this was happening. My preference had been to wait, to have a delayed cord cutting, to wait until the cord stopped pulsing so that he could receive all the benefits of the cord blood, which I can get into at another time. But that was my preference, was to not cut the cord until it stopped pulsing, which usually takes a few minutes. But I don't even remember them cutting the cord or saying anything to us because he wasn't breathing.
Yep.
So they let Chris tell me it was a boy. At some point along the way, they cut the cord and then they took him to the baby team. Yeah.
The baby team in the corner.
Mm-hmm. So I'm like lying there just kind of in shock. Like mostly I remember just being happy it was over, happy we had a baby. Honestly, not even realizing what was going on. Mm-hmm. Like in my head, like I knew logically that I shouldn't have been separated with my, like in the moment I don't think I even realized it. Looking back, like, or leading up to it, of course I didn't want to be separated from the baby after he was born. I had planned to have golden hour and, I wanted him to latch in the delivery room and all of that stuff. But I think in the moment, I was just so happy to be done, so happy he was here. I wasn't even upset about all that or questioning any of it. Mm-hmm. When they took him away, I was just like, I was still, I think, I don't know, panting from exhaustion and just like happiness. And I still had to deliver the placenta, which was like easy breezy, no big deal, until the midwife held it up and said, "You kind of have a wimpy placenta." At which point I was like, or wimpy cord. It was a wimpy cord. At which point I was like, "Thank you." But so they took him away from me because he wasn't breathing, which I didn't know. But I found out later that they called bagging him when they have to use the little kind of like pump with the bag attached to it to get him breathing. He very quickly started breathing again. And there was no like diagnosis or anything. Like a lot of times when you have a long pushing phase, sometimes they attribute babies not breathing right when they're born to, they call it like stunned birth. There's no way to know. They got him breathing quickly and there were no other like negative symptoms or anything else. But I mean, do you want to share the one moment that was really scary?
So I didn't know what to do when they took him into the corner, but because I don't know, it's doctors and nurses everywhere. I wanted to stay out of the way. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the midwife was like, go over there and see your baby boy. And I was like, oh, I can like be right over the shoulders of these people. She turned around, because I was trying to see and I couldn't. And I was like, well, how's he doing it? And she turned around and she goes, not good. He's not breathing. Mm-hmm. I was like,
pardon?
Oh, I don't know if you could tell in the plain clothes, but I'm the dad. And so now I'm going to have
a panic attack,
a mini panic attack.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to turn around because then my wife will see me panicking. Right, you were trying to be strong
for me.
So then I think I went back over to you and you're like, what's going on? And I was like, they're still just working on making sure all the breathing and stuff. You had a long day mm-hmm. in there, obviously.
I still wasn't panicking at that point. It hadn't clicked for me.
And then they put him in the, I liken it to like the old school like diver suit in the Navy. Like what was that? Men of Honor.
Men of Honor, yes.
With Cuba Gooding Jr. when they're in that basically like they put him in that thing.
The little clear bassinet box.
Yeah.
For those wondering what we're talking about.
Yeah, I've got Nerf guns and
scuba suits.
So you didn't even hold him. He was on your chest for about 10 seconds. And then they at least gave you the satisfaction of stopping the thing there pretty close so you could see him before they wheeled him away.
And he was stable at that point. Like he was breathing on his own.
They were just
he was pinking up. He looked good. And I remember they wheeled him over so I could look at him and I was like, can I hold him? And they were like, no. Again, it's like all protocol. So they weren't even taking him to like the true NICU. They were taking him to the I think
processing,
or like it's like an in between. I can't remember exactly what they call it.
Because that's where I remember I went.
It's like a step down is what they call it. A step down from the NICU.
Well, they like stamped his little foot. They took a picture of him and gave it to me so I could go back. It was interesting because they were like, again, like I'd done this many times and I had forgotten. You're like, oh, like, go.
Right.
And I was like, well, go where?
Yeah.
They're wheeling him out like we're in the hospital.
Yeah.
Like all these doors say, employee only, or his employee, doctor, whatever, personnel, medical personnel only. They're like, no, you're supposed to. So
yeah, you went with him and I stayed by myself, with a midwife and and they kind of, she cleaned me up and everything. And again, it was just like surreal. It was, we'd gone through this crazy intense process and experience. And then all of a sudden now you're gone, the baby's gone. And then the midwife left. And for 20 or so minutes, it felt like a long time, I'm just sitting in the delivery room by myself. And I remember thinking, did I just have a baby or did I dream all of that?
Yeah.
It was very strange. And at that point, I think I was still feeling positive just because I had done it. I'd done what I'd set out to do. But in hindsight, I think that that whole process was really it really impacted my postpartum recovery and experience. And it was really sad in hindsight. Obviously he was okay. And that was the most important thing, but it was very strange to be separated so quickly from him. And then to be just by myself, it was very odd. But then eventually you came back and you brought a little picture of him.
The funny thing about coming back, so I watched them do all that stuff and then they're kind of like, okay, like you can go back to the room. And mind you, I just followed 4 or 5 people wheeling my newborn son through this maze of doors and stuff that like civilians don't go through. Like you're and they're like, yeah, you can go back. And like they take him somewhere else. And I'm like, where the hell am I?
Yeah. We made it back. And then we had to call our families and tell them they've been waiting with bated breath. Because Chris couldn't really text them, couldn't really communicate while I was laboring because I needed him to be physically needed him to to lean on. And so I think you managed to squeeze out a text to tell everyone that I was pushing. And then it was hours later. So everyone's waiting to find out A, is everything okay? B, is it a boy or girl? And
he was born at what, 8:02 or something?
Yeah.
And I think
I ended up pushing for an hour and a half.
Yeah, you had started pushing at 6:30. And I think I sent a text around 6:30 and probably didn't send another one. I was probably back down in that room by either, so it had been 2 hours since I had just sent out to a couple groups pushing.
Right. Their plan had been to, call our families and show them the baby. And
oh yeah.
But so we called them and FaceTimed them and we showed them the picture. It was really sweet. They actually printed a picture for Chris to bring back. and so we showed our families a picture of him. I'm sure they were like, where's the baby? But we, got to tell everyone it was a boy. And then the name, which was so sweet and special. And then we eventually got moved to the recovery room. And then they finally brought him to us around, I think, like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So it had been like 5 hours since he'd been born until I finally got to hold him again.
7 hours.
7 hours? Oh, yeah. I did that math very wrong.
You just set a time.
Ignore that. So finally brought him to us, and I hadn't slept a wink yet because we didn't know when he was going to come. So I just felt like I was every, minute I was just waiting for them to open the door and bring him in. And they finally did. And I finally got to hold him and nurse him. And yeah, it was wild.
It was a long day.
Anyone who has a newborn baby or has had a newborn baby knows it was a very long day, which led into a very long, many months without sleep.
And here we are 4 years later.
Yeah, now he's 4. He just turned 4 last month. So we were in the hospital for the standard kind of 2 days for vaginal delivery, but he had some sort of infection, which is probably, they thought, related to like the infection fever thing that I was spiking when I was laboring. But they weren't able to like identify what the infection was, what it was caused by. Like they weren't able to isolate the bacteria or anything like that. Just that he had like a small infection. That was all we ever knew.
And then they were basically like, yeah, no, we're good with how good he is. So y'all get out of here.
Well, but they wanted to keep him an extra day.
Oh,
and I remember they wanted to keep him an extra day. Again, just kind of like standard protocol. And they were going to send us home and keep him. And I remember I just broke down sobbing when the OB came in to tell me. And I think she took pity on us because I was a mess. I remember that, oh my gosh, it was kind of comical because the lactation consultant was in there trying to help me latch. And so I'm like, and then the OB comes in to deliver this news. And so I'm there, boobs out, trying to get the sweet lactation consultant is like trying to help me. And then the OB comes in and is like delivering all this news. And I'm just like sobbing. I was blubbering, I would call it. And she took pity on us. And she was like, well, when the charge nurse comes in, you can ask her about this thing called nesting, which is where basically like if they have an open room, they'll let you stay an extra night with your baby. So you don't have to be separated. She's like, I can't make any promises. Like it's really unpredictable, but you can ask the charge nurse about it.
Yeah. They're like, there'll be no services, and
yeah, they're like, you're technically discharged. Like you won't get meals. You won't get like, someone coming to check on you. They'll check on the baby, but not you. And I was like, fine, I don't care. I just don't want to leave him. And so we did end up having to go home for a couple hours without him, but then we came back.
But that was actually nice.
Yeah.
I recall. So I guess we stayed there 3 nights. We had to leave in the morning because they were like, we're going to need the room. But they weren't ready to give us kit. And it was like later that night, right? So I think we left out of there by like late morning or something. And they wanted us to come back around 8 or 9 p.m.
Yeah.
So we got to go home, shower. We had a hat he had worn. So we let Stella, our lab, who's passed now, but was alive back then. And so she got to sniff his little hat and we slept.
Not as much as we should have. I think we were giddy, but we slept for a little bit.
It felt good to lay in that
in
bed.
Your own bed. Yeah.
And then we woke up, went back there. We were in this sort of weird
waiting room, holding room. The thing that I remember most distinctly from that period of leaving and coming back was wondering if I would recognize him.
The kid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they kind of all look the same at that point.
Well, he looked like a mushy alien me.
Yeah. So. Yes. But I remember being like, okay, we need to make sure this is our baby. Like, that was just in my weird postpartum anxiety state. That was something that kept flashing through my mind. But yeah, then we finally got to bring him home, and Stella, our dog, got to give him all the sniffs and kisses, and we proceeded to not sleep.
And that's probably for another podcast.
You just heard the birth story of Christopher Glenn Wilson Jr., also known as Kit. And yeah, we appreciate you listening to this first episode of Arrivals and hope that you will tune in for many, many more to come, where we'll have lots of different guests. I will at some point eventually also tell our second birth story of our second son, but I'll let some other people come in and contribute in between now and then. So thank you guys for listening. And thank you, Chris, for joining me and doing this with me.
My pleasure.
Until next time, I'm your host, Merelise Wilson, and you've been listening to the Arrivals Podcast.